right, so I'm here with Varg Freeborn. I just took day one of gutter fight. Excellent class. I would echo what a lot of the guys said in class, that the morning lecture was worth the price of admission alone, and then all the range stuff was bonus. So I have a couple questions for Varg. First off, thanks so much for taking the time. I know your time is valuable. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
So getting right into it, how does a person get experience with violence and violent situations without risking injury or death?
That's real simple. It's force on force. That's all you've got. You have to get in and do sparring and rolling for the physical combatives part of it, and you have to do simunitions, UTM, for the gunfighting part of it, and that's the only way you can do it. Experience is a big part of your orientation, and if you don't build that part of your orientation, that leaves big white space. White space ends up being uncertainty at the time of the fight. So.
Okay, and so on that line, what do you recommend for force on force? What companies for the gunfighting, and then what do you recommend for like the martial, the physical?
So the combative stuff is going to be particular to your local area. So I don't know who is good in Kansas City or, Topeka. As far as classes goes or companies, I've done a lot of work with Forge on the UTM force on force stuff here at Alliance, and I think they're great and a little more advanced, a little more driven towards LE stuff with some of their things, but I think that's very beneficial. I know that I see Aaron Cowan's doing an active shooter force on force class that seems to be really popular with guys. So I would consider that, even though I've not attended, I'd consider that to be vetted by people that know what they're doing and attended a lot of classes and say it's a pretty good class.
Okay.
Craig Douglas is doing ECQC obviously, so that's going to be that, get down and fight over a gun thing. That's an important component of it. The important thing to remember is that you need to go out and find all these different things, because just because you've done, the active shooter class doesn't mean that you've got the whole bag of tricks now.
Right.
Just because you've done ECQC doesn't mean that you're ready to get into, a close fight with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So attending as many of these different companies and training that you can is going to give you a more full picture of what you can get into and what you need to know in order to get out of it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So along with combatives, what would you say is a good place to start? You mentioned that you're not a big fan of BJJ.
I personally am not, and that's an unpopular thing to say sometimes, but it's just my personal preference. I've done it. I was in a Pedro Sauer school for a little while, and then I went to a kid who was black belted by Tom DeBlas, and worked with some of the Hibero guys for a little bit. So I've seen a couple different, influences and, styles in that, and it's absolutely beneficial, and somebody should do it. If you're not doing anything else, you need to get on the mat and do something.
Okay.
Just don't get stuck in the world of thinking that every problem is going to be solved on the ground, because that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
So you need some stand-up work. You need some striking. I'm a big fan of boxing for the conditioning work. Muay Thai is really cool because it involves some hard bones striking, which is knees and elbows.
Right.
Kind of stuff is really cool, and it's very beneficial. If I'm clinched in or in a ground fight or something like that, I'm an elbow throwing fool, right?
Right.
So I'm going to catch you with some really hard bones and make sure it hurts, and preferably in soft parts of your body, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that you learn in places like that. And if you're going somewhere that's teaching you something that's street ready, it's more valuable if you're trying to learn something for self-defense than it is for, say, an art that you learn for self-development.
Right.
Self-development and self-defense don't have to be mutually exclusive, but they don't always go together.
Right. Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your book. Really got a lot out of it. what other books would you recommend people read to be more or better prepared to face a violent encounter?
Yeah, so when I wrote Violence of Mind, I intentionally tried to not read anything else that year when I was writing that book, because I didn't want to, I wanted to write really my words. Like,
Right.
I wanted to be as fresh as possible, even though we're all influenced unbelievably and inextricably with
Right.
the information of other people, especially if we're students, as I am. So the thing that I think really contributed the most to getting my voice out of it was, to think about my own experiences and stuff like that. So if I'm recommending books, I'm going to be looking for books that are written from the experiences of the author, right? So that's number one criteria. So I think the classic stuff like Musashi, Book of Five Rings, that's an obvious standard for me. Art of War is a standard. I don't reread the Art of War like I do the Five Rings.
Okay.
I'll read that every year, probably for the rest of my life,
Okay.
a few times a year, because I always get something new out of it. Any books on Bushido, any books on samurai, swordsmanship, ancient philosophy is swordsmanship, stuff like that. When I talk about on the range about muzzle control, muzzle awareness, a lot of that comes from ancient swordsmanship.
Okay.
It's very, very much the same thing. How you
Right.
think about your muzzle and how they thought about the edge of their blade is very, very similar. And you see how they were very ceremonious and ritualistic with a weapon. How they placed the weapon back into its sheath, how they extracted the weapon from its sheath, very ceremonious. And that's because it's ritualized because of the importance and the significance of it.
Right.
And we don't treat the gun the same way, and it drives me crazy.
I see.
I think it should ceremoniously be unholstered and holstered and handled because it's that important.
Right.
So drawing from stuff like that, any books that talk about stuff like that, I'm all over it.
Okay. Cool. What tools do you carry on you for self-defense? You were talking about being a minimalist. Is there certain things that, yes, I always carry this if I can, but that's it?
If I can, I'll carry Glock 19 with the 15+1. My Glock's armored, so I have an optic on it. And if I can, I'll carry that.
Okay.
And if I can, I will sometimes have maybe a small blunt object that I can push or punch with, something like that. And if I can't carry anything, then I ultimately am the last
Right.
weapon that I can have, right? It's
Right.
me, and it's my mind. So
Right.
I'm always in a mindset of being able to defend myself no matter what tools I have or don't have.
Right.
And that's because there's things in your environment. You send me into any room and I can come out with a weapon if I need to.
Right.
So there's always something around that you can use to your advantage.
I like that mindset of I myself and the weapon. Everything else is just a tool that I can use to get the job
Enhance it.
done.
Yeah, yeah. It just enhances my capabilities. It's not the entirety of my capabilities.
Right. Yeah. Good. Do you endorse or have any concealed carry insurance? Any like CCW safe, second call defense? What do you think about those?
I don't personally have any. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but me having experience with the court systems the way I do on both sides, having been through the lethal force process, and also having worked for an attorney as a job and done legal research and worked with the courts through that end of it, I like to see data. And so these are kind of new, and I want to see, after a while, like the data they're turning out in terms of how many cases are actually successful and what that really means and stuff like that.
I see.
So it's just, I want to, for me personally, I'm just waiting to see more data that comes out of it.
Okay. All right. I had a buddy that asked this question. He said, as society that wants to help someone in a violent upbringing, so like your upbringing where you were in a violent home or a situation, what can society or people that want to help and provide some sort of help for those kids, what can society do? Or is there something that is even possible to do?
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there's some kids that are unreachable. But I think that people want to feel progress in their lives. That's what makes us happy. If we essentially sit down and think about it, when you feel depressed or you feel like you're not getting shit done or things aren't going right, it's because you're not making the progress you think you need to be making in some way. Like you're just not moving. And it doesn't mean that you're not successful. It was just this past week, a couple of very successful people killed themselves, right? So it's not success. Progress isn't synonymous with success, as it's defined by people outside of you. Progress is an internal thing. And if you don't feel like you're making progress internally, and as a kid, it's more external. It becomes more internalized as we get older. We become more withdrawn. But as a kid, the world's wide open, and you want that praise, you want that acceptance, you want that hey, you're making progress. So to be able to do something for kids where they have, this sense of accomplishment, where they feel like they're making progress and being recognized for it, I think is the biggest thing that could change things around for those. That would have been the biggest thing for me. There were people that did that in my life, and I think that kept me enough on the right side of the equation that I came out to be the way that I did, rather than like some of these other guys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What are your thoughts on the state of the Second Amendment right now in the U.S. and as far as where do you see us going, and where are we doing a bad job, and where are people, society, the Second Amendment community or culture, where are we doing a good job? What are your thoughts there?
I don't involve myself or my opinions in public political debates. But I'll say this. Obviously, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I think that it's very, very important to have the right to defend yourself equally with whatever they could be bringing at you. Right. So I think that's an inherent thing of being alive as a human being, that you don't tell me what to do or what to keep in my house or what I can protect my family with, right?
Right.
Now, outside of that, what I don't like, what I think we're doing wrong as a society, is we're driving ourselves towards a violent end of our debating, right? So our debating is ending in violent conflict. I don't see it going anywhere else, because we're at this point where people hate the leader and they hate someone who supports them. And then people hate them, and now we hate each other, and everybody just wants to fight. And then really, when it comes down to it, my life hasn't changed drastically from one president to the next.
Right.
And the best things that ever happened in my life were done because I got up and made them happen. Right?
Yeah.
So you get up and make shit happen in your life and help your neighbor. Quit worrying about what these assholes up there in the suits are doing, because that's something that it all starts here. If you want a better world, clean your house up, and then your house is clean, help your neighbor, and your neighborhood's good, get together and go down and help your city. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but if you don't clean your house up, what are you doing?
Right.
How many people are out here screaming at somebody, screaming at them and hating them and ruining everything, and this is terrible, and you go, if they went back to their house and looked at their own household and their own life, it's a mess.
Right.
It's a wreck. Your own progress is not happening the way that you think it should, and your family's a mess and everything's out of control. Like, go fix your own house, and then you can start talking to your neighbor and helping them fix theirs.
Yeah.
I mean, I fixed my house, and now I'm out here helping people fix theirs.
Right.
And that's what I'm doing. That's my part, and that's all I know about the political process. Is I'm fixing my own house, and when I get it right, I'm going giving suggestions to other people, and if they like what I say, and it helps them fix theirs, and then we go together and help somebody else fix theirs.
Right. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. That's all the questions that I had. I sure appreciate your time. Really appreciate the class and the book and the podcast. Just I really get a lot of benefit from the stuff that you're putting out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say thanks, and sure appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Thank you.
Great.